All right, class, today I'm going to talk to you about how to fill in your hue and value scale worksheet. So I recommend starting with the hue scale and moving to the value scale. The first thing we need to talk about is the supplies, the things you're going to need. So you're going to need your prepared hue and value scale worksheet. You're going to need your palette to mix colors on. You're going to need a palette knife. You're going to need a rag or a couple rags. You're going to need some paint brushes, your choice of what brushes you'd like to use, and then paint. You're going to need your titanium white, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. So you have blue, brown, and white. To get started, you are going to put the actual worksheet to the side. You don't need it just yet. And then you're going to move your palette in front of you, because you're going to do all the work here on the palette before you put anything on the worksheet. It's kind of a mess over here. So the first thing you got to know is you really need to take your time, go slow, so that you don't get confused and you don't get white brushes covered in brown paint or whatever. So stay organized, keep your palette clean and organized. So I already have some paint out here, but I'm going to put a little bit more blue over here. I'm going to put a little bit more brown on this side, and I think I've got plenty of white, but I put the white down here just so you kind of have things organized similar to how they are on the hue scale. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my black, and I'm going to mix my black in the middle because that's where it is on my scale. So I'm going to take some blue, actually I'll take a fair amount of blue, I'm going to take some brown, I'm going to mix these together. And you want to try to get this to be a neutral black, so it's not too blue and it's not too brown. There's a couple ways you can check that out. If you're not sure, you can just take a little bit of the paint off to the side and add a little bit of white to it and see how it looks. Now I did that and I can see that this blue or this brown looks a little bit too blue for my needs. So I'm going to add a little bit more brown. Likewise, if it ended up being too brown, I could just add more blue. Another thing you can do to check to see if it's too blue or too brown is you can actually just take a little bit of the paint and just drag it so you can see it through it just a little bit on the palette. So here I can see that it's pretty neutral. It's not too brown, it's not too blue, it's pretty solid. So from here I'm going to put a little bit of this black over here, and I'm going to take a little bit of this black and I'm going to put it over here. And I'm going to turn this one, that's too much. I'm going to turn this one into a cool black, like it says on the worksheet, and I'm going to turn this into a warm black, like it says on the worksheet. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this, and I'm going to add a little bit of brown to this. Cool. So now the top scale on the hue and the hue scale, it goes from ultramarine blue to a cool black, to a neutral black, to a warm black, to burnt sienna, brown, straight from the tube. And so now that we've got that done, I'm going to add white to all these colors and make this next scale. So I'm going to take a little bit of my neutral black, set it here, it's probably too much, doesn't take much at all, and I'm going to add some white. And I want to make a middle value gray. I don't want it to be too dark or too light. I'm going for the middle value. I'd say this is probably just a little bit too light, so I'm going to add a little bit more black. I'm going to go with that. That's pretty good. And so from here, I'm going to move out to the left, and then I'll move to the right. So I'm going to take some of this blue. Doesn't take a lot. And again, I'm going to go for that middle value. So it's not too light, not too dark. Should be a similar value as this. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to go all the way to the blue. Alright, so now I've got my cool side done. I need to do the warm side. So the warm black and white, try to get the middle value. And then I'll take the burnt sienna straight from the tube with a little bit of white and go for that middle value. That's probably a little bit light. I'll add a little bit more of the burnt sienna. Cool. So now I've got my light blue, my cool gray, my neutral gray, my warm gray, and then my light brown. So from here I only have 4 more colors to mix. I've got to mix my dark cool gray and my light cool gray. I've got to mix my dark warm gray and my light warm gray. So I'll go ahead and do that. So you can just take a little bit of this and a little bit of this, mix them together, and you'll get the color you need. Then we do it over here to this brown. And now I've got all my colors mixed. I go across from cool to warm through my blacks, and I've got my middle values from cool to warm, and then I go from my cool darks to white, and then my warm darks to white. So the next step after you've done this is just to put it on the worksheet, which I'll go ahead and do. So I'll move this back in place, I'll move this off to the side. So you can do this in a couple ways. You can use a brush, which means you're going to have to probably clean it a lot, which is fine, or you can use your palette knife. This is kind of a big palette knife, so it makes it a little bit difficult to get through. I would say if your palette knife is a little smaller, you can do it a little bit easier, or you can just use a brush, it doesn't matter. People use different brushes. I recommend the Filbert number 2. It's small enough that it's easy to control, but it's big enough that it's not going to take you forever to fill in like a 1 inch by 1 inch block. So I'm going to go ahead and use my knife. Actually, I'm going to go get a smaller palette knife. I'll be right back. This one's really little. I'm going to add my my neutral black into that middle spot. I'm not concerned about crisp edges and getting all the boxes filled in like absolutely perfectly. If there's little gaps or the corners aren't filled in perfectly, I don't care about that. I want the colors to be opaque, so I don't want to be able to see the writing through it, and I don't want to be able to see the paper through it, through the colors. I can show you an example. With these dark colors, it's easy to make the color too transparent, or it's easy to see that it's too transparent. So you might have to go a little bit thick with the paint so that you can't see it, which will also mean that it takes longer to dry. There. I've got my hue scale done from cool to warm and from dark to light. After this, I'm going to clean all this stuff up, and then I'm going to do my value scale. Okay, now I've cleaned everything up. The next step is to mix a lot of a neutral black. So I'm going to squeeze out a fair amount of brown. I'm going to squeeze out a fair amount of blue. And then right here, in the middle of my palette, I'm going to mix pretty much all the brown and the blue together and try to get a black that isn't too warm and isn't too cool. I got lucky, that's pretty good on my first try. So I'm going to take all of this black and I'm going to put it over here in the corner. And I'm going to take all of this extra stuff and just get it out of the way. And then I'm going to take my white and I'm going to set it over here in the corner. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mix that neutral gray again, and I've got one I can compare it to. So I'm going to take, it really doesn't take a lot of black. The black is a much stronger color than the white. Actually, I'm going to mix a fair amount of this. So I will take quite a bit of that and this. And I'm going to try to get a gray that is pretty neutral. It's not too light, it's not too dark. And once again, I'm going to pre-mix everything before I put it on the palette. So I can take this color and I can compare it, and that's pretty good. So I'm satisfied with that. That's my middle gray. And so from here, I'm going to mix from gray to white. And then over on this side, I'm going to mix from gray to black. So between white and neutral gray, I've got 4 colors I need to mix. So I will do that now. I'm going to start with the white. I'm going to add it over here, and it takes just a little bit of gray to get your 1 value. That's actually way too dark. So I'm just going to move that over there. Take a little bit of that and add a little bit of more white to it. That's pretty good. Then I've got my 0, my 1, my 2, and now I need my 3, my 4, and then this is my 5. So I'll take a little bit more of the gray, a little bit of white. Now I've got to make it darker than this, but not as dark as that. So that probably needs to be a little bit darker. And then I can take a little bit of this color that I just mixed and a little bit of the 5 value. And now I've got my 0, my 1, my 2, my 3, my 4, and my 5, and I'll just continue over on this side. So I'll start with my really dark color. Now I've done my 11 color value scale from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I can tell right now that my 6 is probably a little bit light and my 7 might be a little bit light. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and make my 7 my 6. I'm going to take this color right here and I'm just going to move it over. That makes that just a little bit darker. I'm just going to take a little bit of that over here and refresh it with a little bit of the black. Now it's darker than that, so I need to make it a little bit lighter. That's much better. And so here I go, negotiating the colors, making them a little lighter, a little bit darker, until I have what I think seems like a good smooth gradient from white to black. And after I get that done, I will get my palette back over here, and then I start filling it in. If you make a mistake, you can just wipe it right off. Your rag is your eraser. Or you can paint over it. That's fine too. Now the 5 value has a bar next to it. So that whole thing gets filled in with the gray. So I'm putting my 5 value in that spot, and I'm going to then fill in this entire bar with it. So now I've got my hue scale and my value scale done. They're kind of sloppy, but that's okay. I want to make sure the colors are mixed well. That's far more important to me than the cleanliness. So that's everything for this project. If you have any questions or you run into any problems while you're working, just let me know, and I will help you out. Have a good day. Talk to you soon.